I've been called a vampire. I've been called a lot of things, but phlebotomy, if you've had medical terminology at all, phlebotomy, you could probably break it down as to what it means. But in layman's term, it is just most often referred to as drawing blood from people. So it could be, whether you're drawing blood to test it in a laboratory, or, sometimes people have to have blood removed or drawn for therapeutic reasons. Maybe you're doing a donor collection, but there's lots of reasons why you may have blood drawn. If you've had medical terminology, phleb is a vein, and otomy is to cut or make an incision. So it's actually the surgical opening or a puncture of a vein in order to withdraw blood or introduce a fluid. So maybe giving an IV fluid, or historically as part of the bloodletting process. So bloodletting back in the old days, medieval times, actually as recent, probably in the 30s and 40s, people were actually, if you were sick, they thought maybe you had bad spirits or bad chemistry in your blood. And so what they would do is they'd put a cut in your arm and bleed out your blood, thinking that was going to make you better, which maybe it did, but most likely it probably didn't. And it was, other than just using like an incision, that's where the leeches came into play. So if you've ever seen like a movie where I think it's like Dracula, where they use leeches to take the blood out and everything, and it was spooky. I love this. It's, scary movies are my favorite thing. But anyway, that was kind of what they did for bloodletting. They'd either make an incision and let your blood out, or they'd use leeches that would like bite you and suck your blood out. So yeah, I'm glad we've advanced from that. So what is the role of a phlebotomy technician? So the person who performs the phlebotomy is called a phlebotomist. And the phlebotomy technician is the one that's responsible for primarily collecting blood specimens or samples to give to the lab for testing. The phlebotomist is a very important part of the healthcare team, and often they're the first, what they might call the first line of the process. So they're the ones that you approach this patient, put the patient at ease. You're the one that's dealing patient to patient. In the laboratory setting, a lot of times if you're in the laboratory doing the actual diagnostic tests, you don't have a lot of patient contact. So we really rely on phlebotomists to be that kind of in between the patient and the laboratory testing. I also think that phlebotomy is one area of the hospital or the healthcare setting that exposes you to all areas of the hospital. If you think you want to be in healthcare, but you're really not sure what you want to do, like I don't know if I want to be a nurse or a doctor or radiology or whatever, I highly, highly encourage you to work as a phlebotomist to begin with, because you're going to get exposed. You're going to go to the emergency room. You're going to go to labor and delivery. You're going to go to the NBICU, which is the working with the newborns. I've been in surgery before. When I first started as a lab assistant, I actually had to develop x-rays as well. So, there's radiology. You're just everywhere in the hospital. You get exposed to the language. You start to hear those terms that you start to recognize people talking the medical language. So you get exposed to that. You also work with all different kinds of people in the hospital. So you might work with nurses, you might work with doctors, Again, radiologists, surgeons, you know, I just think it's a very good base for whatever healthcare career that you might move into. It's also a great job if you're going to, like work your way through college. Great part-time job or full-time job. Some common things that a phlebotomist might do. Right off the bat, they're going to be explaining the procedures to the patient. You don't want to go into a patient's room and just say, I'm drawing your blood and stab them with a needle. They don't usually appreciate that too well. So you're the one that's explaining it to them. You're trying to make them more comfortable. They're already nervous. They're already not feeling well. And so the more comforting that you can be to the patient, the easier the procedure is going to go. They are oftentimes, if you're in a home health situation or a therapeutic donation, you're taking blood pressure. You can take their pulse and respiration readings. Of course, you're drawing the blood. You're bandaging, you're taking the blood and the specimens and you're taking them to the lab for testing. Some phlebotomists or lab assistants sterilize the equipment. They clean the workspaces. They update patient medical records. So there's just a lot of things that a phlebotomist can do. And it really depends on where you're working, how much responsibility a phlebotomist would have. As a lab assistant, I would even do like urine testing, dipsticks, point of care testing, streaking microbiology plates. Like I said, developing x-rays. So, there's a lot that you can do, and it really just depends on your facility as what your responsibilities are going to be. Again, they work in hospitals, clinics, just about any kind of medical situation, home health. At one point, I was actually working where I would go to people's houses and do health, like insurance exams for them. It's just like I said, it's a good base to get you started. It is a very demanding profession as well, as far as I should say it's in demand. You could probably find a job as a phlebotomist in almost any hospital, I would think, in Kansas. I know there's jobs out there because they call me at the college like every week. Hey, can you put out a job search for me? I've got, I need 2 phlebotomists, or so it's in a high demand career, and it is one that's growing in demand. And it's not a bad pay scale either. So now, yeah, so that's my face. I have a lot of people, I said, oh, you should do phlebotomy. And they go, oh my gosh, I hate needles. I totally get that. I hate needles. Like I don't want people coming at me with needles. When I go and donate blood, I don't watch. I'm just like, I don't want to watch. I could stick other people though. I can draw blood on other people like all day long. It's a totally different mind shift. So even if you don't like needles, you might try being a phlebotomist. I've only had one person faint on me, and that was a college football player. And he was just like big guy, and I didn't even stick him. I just put the tourniquet on and he was like, blah, out. So totally get it. But like I said, I could do it to other people all day long. I just don't like needles myself. So how do you become a phlebotomy technician? Apply for the job. Like I said, there are so many jobs out there that you basically could, I don't want to say you could walk into a place and they'll say, yeah, we'll hire you. But it's almost like you walk into the place and they'll say, yeah, we'll hire you. there is no certification requirement in Kansas to be a phlebotomist. A lot of hospitals will require you to be 18, but not all of them. I have 16, 17-year-olds that are out there in, like central and western Kansas, where I'm familiar with that area. They're working as phlebotomists on the weekend, after school, making their gas money. So some states will require certification. Kansas does not. I would say the majority, if you want to be certified, the majority of the certification agencies do require you to have a high school diploma. There's a couple of them where you can, like if you're 17 and you're going to graduate within the next 6 months, you can go ahead and take the exam, and then you can get certified when you turn 18. So I've mentioned certification a lot. There's a difference between being certified, like a certified laboratory tech or a certified phlebotomy technician, and completing a certificate program. Certification is like a third-party agency that you go and you take an exam, and they say, yes, you have the knowledge, and yes, you have the skills. There's a lot of organizations out there that offer certification exams. Probably the one that is most recognized would be the American Society of Clinical Pathology, or ASCP. AMT, the American Medical Technologist, is also very well known, and they actually sponsor the HOSA competition event, so that's kind of cool. Other ones that we hear about a lot are NHA, AMCA, ASPT. I mean, there's a lot of initials, and they all have pretty much, they have the same basic requirements, but they all kind of, put their own little twist on it. But if you're serious about your job, if you take your education and your skills seriously, certification should be your end goal. It just shows other people, like potential employers, that you know what you're doing. It shows them that, you take your job seriously and professionally. If you live in California, Colorado, Louisiana, Nevada, maybe Florida, there's about 13 states where once you take the certification exam, then you also have to take a state exam. And then when you take the state exam, that's called licensure. So it's a little bit, there's different terms there, but just completing a program like the classwork and the clinical practicum part, that doesn't make you certified. It just means you've completed a program. That's a hard thing that a lot of my students don't absorb that. And they're like, well, what do you mean I'm not certified? Well, you haven't taken the big test. So that's kind of how certification works.
Karen, you've got one question from attendee. Taylor, go ahead.
Thank you. So you were talking about like ages where you could get certifications. I'm currently in my CNA class, and I should be getting the certification by the end of the year. But next year they have a phlebotomy unit that they're adding in, and they are letting me come back to do that because I'm only a junior this year. So I could do that and get the state and final exam in that class so I can be certified. Would that just be pending until I turn 18?
It depends on what agency you take your exam with.
Okay.
So, and it also, I'll get into that a little bit more, but that's a good question, because that's one question that I do get a lot. Like, well, I'm, only a junior this year. I'm only 16 this year. And we do have 16-year-olds that take our program and take our phlebotomy class. They aren't able to get certified until they're at least 17, but that's okay in some instances too. And I'll get into that in just a second. And if I don't answer that question for you, make sure you holler at me for clarification, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so training programs. There's a lot of them out there. There are many different ways that you can train to be a phlebotomy technician and to get to that point where you can take your certification exam. There are some programs that you can, Google, and it'll come up and it'll say phlebotomy phlebotomy training program, online phlebotomy training program. And you can, pay for the class. You can take the class online. You can go through all the modules and the lessons and everything. And then you can take a test at the end, and then they'll send you a certificate and it says, congratulations, here is your certificate of phlebotomy training. That's not certification. That just means that you've completed a training program. It's a certificate that says you've completed your training. The problem with those programs is that every certification, like national certification exam, where you could be certified to become a phlebotomy technician, require you to do live blood draws. So if you do a program that is totally online without any live sticks, you really haven't met the qualifications to become certified. So there's that. There's face-to-face classes and programs, which are great. And sometimes they're, like all you do is take the phlebotomy class and get the live sticks. And then you can, as long as you meet the certification requirements, you can take your exam and become certified. There are some programs that are face-to-face and they're part of another program. So like maybe they're part of the medical assisting program or medical laboratory assistant program. And so you're taking other courses as well, and it might lead to a certificate degree or a, like an applied science degree. There's those courses, and they would have, whether they do face-to-face lectures and live blood collections, or if you do online lectures and live blood collections, you still have to have that live blood collections component if you're going to be certified. So you've got online only, which I don't recommend. You've got face-to-face, which is great. And then you have hybrid, which is online classwork, and then you do your live sticks in a hospital in your area, with approval. So there's different ways you can get the training. The training can last anywhere from 2 weeks. Let's say you go in 8 hours a day and all you do is blood collections or the lectures or something. So you can be as short as 2 weeks. It could be like 6 Saturdays in a row. It could be 8 weeks. It could be up to 6 months. So Taylor, as far as your question goes, you asked about taking it in the spring or your senior year. So we have a lot of students that start the class in the fall of their junior year, and then they take the clinical practicum, which is our live stick requirement, in the spring, and then they've graduated, they have their high school diploma, and then they can take the exam that summer. Okay, so it depends on the length of your program, the training program, as to when you would be able to take your exam. It's all about meeting the requirements of the exam that you want to take. Okay, so We also have students that will start it in the spring of their senior year. They're 17. They graduate, they have their high school diploma, they'll do their clinical part in the summer, and then they've met both of those requirements. You know, they have their high school diploma and they're 18. So it's, like I said, it just really depends on your training program. But what you want to do is kind of start with the end in mind, which is figure out what certification test you're going to take, look at the requirements that they need for you to take that certification, and then find a program or make sure your training program meets those requirements.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So here are just a few, and this is a lot of information. I'm not gonna, don't worry if you know, don't worry about trying to remember it or anything. If anybody wants it, I'll send it to you. But these are probably the most recognized certification exams. And you can see that they all have different requirements, but there's one thing that they all require, and that is live blood collections. So you can't become certified if all you're doing is practicing on a plastic arm. Okay, so it just, you really have to have that live component. They vary in the number of hours, like you could have 120 hours, 200 hours. Some of them you just take the course and then the program determines, there's just a lot to it. But anyway, the biggest part about this chart is that they all require live venipunctures, and they all require that you have some kind of education. However, they all have the option of using work experience instead of a training program if you want to be certified. So let's say I work for, you know, a year full-time as a phlebotomist. That would qualify me as being able to take the certification exam. So there's a work experience route, there's a training program route, and it, again, you just have to decide what test you're going to take and then go from there. So the good stuff. Yay. Now we can talk about phlebotomy and HOSA. First of all, the very first thing that you want to do if you're interested in the Phlebotomy Competitive Event for HOSA is pull up the guidelines. I cannot talk, like, the answer to any question that I ever ask you about a competitive event should be, it's in the guidelines. Okay, so that's my number one thing. It's in the guidelines. And the HOSA event is sponsored by AMT. AMT also has, you can go to their website, and they have a little thing on their website that says, hey, if you want to be in HOSA, we're sponsoring the event, and here's some hints for you. Here's some resources for you. They have a list of skills that we might choose from for your event. They have study resources. They have videos. They have information on the profession. There's a lot of good stuff there. So I highly recommend you to start with the guidelines and also look at the AMT's website. And you could get some great information on both of those sites. So the competition for the phlebotomy. Round one is going to be a written test. There's 50 multiple choice questions, and on the guidelines, there's a breakdown of what those samples or what those questions are going to cover. So it's going to cover things like how do you collect a blood specimen? It's going to say what tubes do you put that in? It's going to talk about communication, how to communicate, how to document that you've drawn blood. It's going to talk about the safety standards and the legal, ethical, and professional considerations that it come along with drawing blood on a person. And then there's also going to be some terminology and some anatomy and physiology stuff. There's also going to be the recommended books. Catherine Booth and Linda Munt, a competency-based approach. That's actually the book that we use for my students at the college. And I should mention also that we teach the phlebotomy class at the college. We teach that to high school students as well, who are like 16 and above. So it's not like a big technical book. You should be able to work through it easily enough. And then another good book is that Ruth McCall book. And then you also have the AMT resources. And so there's links to all of 3 of those on the phlebotomy guidelines. Imagine that. Round 2 is going to be the skill part. So you take your test and then you go on to skill 2 or round 2. And then round 2, you can see here that there are 8 skills listed on the guidelines. You're not going to do all 8 of them when you go into the competitive event. They're going to probably choose 2 or 3. And sometimes they kind of flow really well together. Like you put on your tourniquet, that's one skill. But you're putting on your tourniquet and then you do a routine blood draw and then the judge says, hey, your patient just fainted. What are you going to do now? So there's 3 skills that might flow really well together. Or you may go in and they say, hey, we need to have you do a 24-hour urine collection explanation to a patient. That might be the skill. So you're not going to have like all 8 of them every time you go in to compete. They're just going to pick 2 or 3 and you don't know which one it's going to be. So it's always a good idea to be familiar with all of those. And it's again, it's very easy to just like Google, YouTube, whatever. And you can find all kinds of videos that will walk through the script for you or, show you how to do this. And I have some of my favorites and I'll put those links on here as well. So hand washing. This is a really good link if you want to watch a video on hand washing. When I went through it, I can send all of this information to Tina and she can send it out. So don't worry about trying to write anything down, but the tourniquet application, I have a favorite video for that. I have a routine venipuncture video. I have a favorite on that. One thing I want to note though on the guidelines, first of all, always do whatever the guidelines tell you to do. But in the guidelines, part of the skill is you tell your patient to clench a fist. And then, but when you're actually drawing blood for a patient, that's something that you don't want to do. So, if it's a blood donation and you're doing a donor, then yeah, pump your fist and clench your fist and everything. So do what the guidelines say, but if you're drawing blood on a patient, don't have them clench or pump their fists. That's just a little pet peeve. How's that? There's another really good video for using a butterfly. And again, I think there's lots of things that you can find even on the HOSA website. They have sample videos. I don't think we have any phlebotomy ones up yet because it's really new. But whew, we don't need to go that fast. Okay, so here is an example of some students in my lab, and this was their first day class and they're learning to tie tourniquets. Now, when we had the state competition last year, that was one of the things I was judging, and it was one of the things that I really saw that people didn't do correctly. So one thing I wanted to point out is that when you do tie a tourniquet, it's not like a tie in a shoe. Okay, you're not like making a knot. You're tucking one strand under so that all you have to do is pull that tail and it comes off, just comes off. And we'll go through a couple of these. I want to start with this one because if you don't have access to somebody else, or maybe you can get a tourniquet and take it home and practice, this is a really good way to practice on yourself without having to have somebody else volunteered to help you, I guess. So in this second video right here, what we're going to do is I want you to picture that her knee is the person's shoulder. Okay, so we're kind of looking down at it, but you're looking at the patient. It's kind of, I think you'll get the idea. But just think of her knee as being the shoulder of your patient. So
cross it, and I pinch in the middle, and then put the bottom over the top and tuck it in.
okay, so do you see how she didn't pull it all the way through like you would for a shoelace? It's just crossed over and then tucked in. And the best thing about this is that when you get to ready to remove the tourniquet, all you have to do is pull that short end.
And
okay, let's show that again.
And then I pinch in the middle to keep the tightness. And then the piece that was on the bottom is gonna tuck through the top. And then
Pull it to release. Now, the other hint about this, and it's one thing that I always do wrong the first time I do it, you'll notice that when she tucks it under, the tails stick up. So they will stick up and you're going to draw blood underneath those tails. Okay, you don't want your tails of your tourniquet to slip, flip down, because then they're going to get in the way of your blood drawing. So I can show that here. So she's crossing it over. She's going to tuck one side under, and then those kind of flopped up, but the idea was they were both pointing up in the first direction. Let's look at this one now. Might be a little bit different angle. So, see, she just tucked one side under, and then all you have to do is pull the short end and it comes right off. So that's as long as your piggy tails, technical term, piggy tails, as long as they're pointing up, then they're not getting in your way. So that's tourniquet work. The other issue that we ran into was the safety devices on butterflies. So this device here is called a butterfly because it has little wings that you pinch together when you're holding it. So, I mean, it has those little butterfly needles is what it's called. So all of our sharps, whether it's a needle that you're going to put on a syringe or a vacutainer holder or whatever, have safety devices incorporated into them. At the state convention, there was a lot of people who, when they took the cap off the needle, they accidentally activated the safety device too, and then you can't use the needle because the safety device is designed to keep you from poking your fingers with the needle. So there's a couple of different butterfly devices, and if you have any chance at all, look and try as many of them as you can. We had 3 different devices here that we use in our lab. And the first one is a spring loaded. And so there's this little black dot here. If you can see that on, so this is the needle up here on the top. And then this is your safety device down here. And there's this little black dot, which means it's a spring activated. So I'll show you how that works.
with this butterfly, make sure you do not touch the black triangle, as that is the trigger to activate the safety device. So hold it at the base with the butterfly when you go to unsheath the needle.
Okay. And then let's look at.
When you are finished, get your gauze. Go ahead and activate the safety. And then
Ooh,
apply
did you
pressure.
see that? Like you push that little black button and it just pops back in there. I didn't even know these things existed until we started making these videos. And then my instructor said, oh, well, this one is spring loaded. That's why you can't get it to move. So anyway, that's why I say you really want to be familiar with your safety devices and how they work before you go into your competitive event. The other type of butterfly safety device that we have, whoop, this one is a slide device. So here's the needle on this side, and then here's the safety device. And when you're done drawing it, it's just going to slide back into the safety device. It's not a trigger loaded thing. You have to manually slide it. So I'll show you how to take off.
Unseat it without fear of activating a safety device.
Okay, so she just, that one you can just hold it and pop the cover off. On this one,
Pause ready. And when you pull the needle out, apply pressure with your index finger. And then activate the safety.
see, she's just kind of sliding it back manually. So that's a slide device. And then the third type that you might see a lot is a squeeze lock. So it has these, you have to squeeze the ends for the safety device to unlock, and then it'll slide. So again,
It will unlock. Kind of pinch it, you can see how it moves in and it will unlock. So be careful when you hold it like this when you're unsheathing. So you may want to hold it like this, closer to the wings when you take the cap off.
okay. And then this is
Pinch
the
at the base. Pull the needle out, you hear the click, and then apply pressure.
okay. Let's look at that one again, because this is the one that I think we used a lot at state.
Pause. Pinch at the base. Pull the needle out, you hear the click, and then apply pressure.
Okay. So anyway, I guess the point of those 3 slides is that just make sure that you familiarize yourself with the safety devices that you're using, whether it's on a needle and vacutainer holder or the butterfly. For the other skills, the main takeaways, I kind of wrote some of those down. If you get the skill where, oh, your patient's fainted, the thing that you want to remember right off the bat is to take your tourniquet off. Before you remove the needle, whether it's just a routine venipuncture or, everything is going smoothly, before you take your needle out of the patient's arm, you always want to take off the tourniquet, because the arm is under pressure with the tourniquet. The blood's under pressure. And if you take the needle out, you're still under pressure and it's going to bleed. So you always want to take the tourniquet off before you remove the needle. And if your patient's fainting, again, the first thing you want to do, take that tourniquet off as fast as you can, and then also make sure that you activate your safety device. Whether you've poked them, like that college player, that football player that fainted on me, get the tourniquet off, activate your safety device so, you're not like running around with a live needle. For heel punctures, that's what you would do to collect blood on a baby. The main thing that you want to concentrate on with this competitive skill is how you hold the baby's foot, and then also to wipe. So you get a poke, the first drop of blood is formed, and then you'll take a gauze and wipe off that first drop, and then you can collect your specimen. And I have a good video for that as well that I can add to my little video list. Taking your gloves off is pretty simple skill. An accidental arterial puncture. Main takeaways again, remove your tourniquet, remove your needle, and then the biggest thing when you accidentally hit an artery instead of a vein is to hold pressure, and you need to hold pressure for a long time. And then the other thing on this skill is that you need to make sure that you verbally to the judges say, I'm telling the nurse this happened and I'm documenting it on the patient's chart, or writing it in, typing it in the computer. You have to say that I'm informing the nurse or the doctor, and that I'm putting it in the patient's medical record. And then 24-hour urine collections, there's a script, and it's just basically memorizing the script. So those are the skills that are involved in the Phlebotomy Competitive Event. This is a really good heel stick demonstration. It goes through the steps: warm the heel, know where you're going to poke, control the drop of blood, and let gravity do the work for you. That's a big one that I think a lot of my students have an issue with. But this video, great video to actually walk you through those steps and help you do it correctly. So, extra things or tips to watch for in the competitive event: the safety devices, safety devices, safety devices. Always take the tourniquet off before you take out the needle, even if you miss. The other thing that they're going to be pretty picky on is the order of the tubes. So there is a specific order that you draw blood and what color of tubes that you use. And as you get into the knowledge or the training for phlebotomy, that'll all be discussed, but there's videos for that as well. And then the other thing is, what do you do if you miss? Like, if we're in a competitive event and you miss, what happens then? You know, sometimes those fake arms, the blood doesn't flow right. You might actually have hit the vein, but you're not getting any blood in your tubes. So I would treat it as just as you would if it were a patient and you missed the vein. Okay, so what do you do if you miss the vein, or you don't get blood when you're sticking a patient? Well, first thing you're going to do, of course, is take your tourniquet off. Then you're going to take your needle out and you're going to activate your safety device, and then you just start over. Okay, so you just treat it like you would a patient, and then there's nothing in the judge's rubric that says you have to collect the blood. It just says, you know, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Well, if you don't collect the blood, you can try again. If that still doesn't work, you can always pretend that you did get the blood collected and say, okay, now I'm putting in the blue tube. Now I'm going to put in the red tube, and you can go ahead and go through those skills with the order of draw. And again, this probably doesn't make a lot of sense if you're not familiar with the order of draw and the actual procedure for drawing blood. But I guess just treat it like you would a patient. If you miss, you're going to miss patients too. I miss patients. So just treat it like you would a patient. So those are the things that I had for the competitive event. We have some time left. I think there was, I think I saw, oh, good. Tina said she'll send out the PowerPoint. Awesome. Thank you. It does have the links on the videos. I can send it to you in a PDF. Then you'll have everything that you need right there. You can just click on those links. So now I went through a lot of that really fast. And if you haven't had the opportunity to practice drawing blood, even on a plastic arm, get your advisor. I'm going to throw your advisor under the bus here. Get your advisor and have them contact the hospital in your town. Because believe me, those hospitals would love to have you come shadow. I can't tell you what kind of responses that I have every time that I'm looking for a place for my students to go. Everybody is very interested in having you come shadow. So you can, if nothing else, you can go and watch the phlebotomists or the lab technicians or whoever draw blood and ask them questions. Why did you start with the blue tube? Why didn't you go with the orange tube instead first, you know? So ask questions, but get in there, watch somebody who's actually doing it, and that will that will help everything make so much more or better sense to you as you're going through this. Get you know, if you do have access to a fake arm, great. Practice, 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 practice. Watch the videos and yeah, I think it's a great career. It's a really cool competitive event, which one that really does take some skills. It's not like, oh, this is how I wash my hands, you know. There is some skill involved in phlebotomy. So yeah, so now I'm done talking. So I'm gonna quit. So if you have questions, ask me questions. Yes, Taylor.
So I wanted to ask, once she shares the slideshow, if it'd be okay if I shared that with my Skill Center class, because we do have a new HOSA starting up in Aberdeen, and they just got access to all these things. I was just wondering if that was something I could share to them for competing.
Yep. Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
And
great.
my contact information is actually on that front page as well. So if they, you know, if your HOSA group wants to do a Zoom, or, you know, if it's something I get out and do site visits a lot for my hospitals, for my students. I don't mind coming by. I think we're actually gonna try and do some skills things later in the fall.
Yeah.
So there's some options there too, where we can get out and practice some of those skills. But yeah,
Okay.
share away.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yep. We've recorded it.
Yep, and this has been recorded, so I will, if you're a Kansas student, your local advisors could access this in the Google Drive, which actually students can access too if you go to the resources for advisors page on the Kansas HOSA website. There's a link to the Google Drive. It might not appear there till tomorrow, but I will also be uploading that. Karen, just email me the PowerPoint and we'll get that all loaded up for you, for anybody who wants to, and please share out. But any other questions for Karen this evening?
Well, that was easy. I was worried there were gonna be some really hard questions. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your evening to listen to me. So, but yeah, anytime you have questions, holler at me, holler at Tina, get your advisor. I'm very available. So, have a good evening.